10 years behind the wheel, 48,000 rides. I thought I'd seen everything this city could throw at me. Late-night drunks confessing affairs, business deals worth millions discussed in my backseat, tears shed over breakups that would reshape entire families. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the woman who slid into my passenger seat on that rainy Thursday evening in October. The pickup was routine. Downtown Financial District, 8:47 p.m. Most rides from that area are predictable. Tired executives heading home to suburban mansions, young professionals bar hopping, or tourists lost in the maze of one-way streets. I pulled up to the sleek glass building, windshield wipers fighting the persistent drizzle that had been plaguing the city all week. She appeared from the shadows between two parked cars, not from the building's well-lit entrance. That should have been my first clue. Elegant, but understated. Navy coat, leather handbag, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like someone's grandmother, the type who bakes cookies and remembers birthdays, the kind of passenger who tips well and makes polite conversation about the weather. "Are you Michael?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight tremor that I initially attributed to the cold. When I confirmed, she settled into the front seat instead of the back. Another small detail that seemed insignificant at the time. Most passengers prefer the anonymity of the rear seat, but she wanted proximity. She needed to see my face, to gauge my reactions to what was coming. If you're enjoying this story about unexpected encounters, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where this incredible journey takes us. As I pulled away from the curb and merged into the evening traffic, I had no idea that this single ride would unravel a mystery 25 years in the making, forcing me to question everything I thought I knew about justice, forgiveness, and the weight of secrets we carry. "Where to?" I asked, adjusting my rearview mirror out of habit. She gave me an address I didn't recognize immediately, somewhere in the old industrial district, about 20 minutes away depending on traffic. I punched it into my GPS, noting how her fingers drummed nervously against her purse as the route calculated. The silence stretched between us as we navigated through the congested downtown streets. Usually, I can read passengers within the first few blocks. The chatty ones start talking before I've even pulled away from the curb. The tired ones slump against the window and close their eyes. The anxious ones check their phones constantly or make calls. But she was different, watchful, studying my profile like she was memorizing every detail. "You've been driving long?" she finally asked, her voice steadier now. I gave her my standard response about the 10 years, how I'd started after losing my job at the manufacturing plant. What I didn't mention was how driving had become my therapy. My way of staying connected to humanity after my divorce left me isolated and bitter. The constant stream of strangers had slowly rebuilt my faith in people. She nodded thoughtfully, then asked something that caught me off guard. "Do you ever think about the lives you've touched, the moments you've witnessed?" It wasn't the usual small talk about traffic or weather. There was weight behind her question, like she already knew the answer mattered more than I realized. As we waited at a red light, she reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, its edges worn from handling. She held it carefully, protectively, but angled it so I couldn't see the image. The light changed, and as I accelerated through the intersection, I caught her reflection in the passenger window, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, her lips moving in what looked like a prayer. "Michael," she said softly, and something about the way she spoke my name sent a chill through me. "Michael Patterson, right? You live on Maple Street, apartment 4B. The traffic around us seemed to fade into background noise. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as every instinct screamed that this wasn't a coincidence. I kept my voice level, professional. "Mom, I think there might be some confusion. How do you know where I live?" But even as I asked, pieces of a puzzle I didn't know existed began shifting in my mind. The way she'd appeared from between the cars, her insistence on sitting up front, the careful study of my face. She turned the photograph toward me, and my breath caught. It was a picture of a young man, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair and kind eyes. He wore a graduation cap and gown, his smile bright with the promise of a future that would never come. I'd never seen the photo before, but I knew that face. It had haunted my dreams for 25 years. "His name was David," she whispered. "David Chen." He was my grandson. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I had to grip the wheel harder to keep the car steady. My mouth went dry, and suddenly the familiar streets around us felt foreign and threatening. The night came rushing back with brutal clarity. December 15th, 1998. I was 23, working double shifts at the factory, exhausted and running late for my girlfriend's birthday party. The roads were icy, visibility was poor, and I was driving too fast. The impact was instantaneous, a young man on a bicycle crossing at the intersection. By the time I saw him, by the time I hit the brakes, it was already too late. The sound of metal and bone colliding would echo in my nightmares for decades. The accident scene replayed in my mind with devastating precision. The crumpled bicycle, the broken body lying motionless on the wet asphalt, the way the streetlight cast everything in harsh, unforgiving shadows. I'd called 911 immediately, my hands shaking so violently I could barely dial. The paramedics worked frantically, but we all knew it was too late. I'd stayed at the scene for hours, answering questions, submitting to sobriety tests, watching as they loaded David's body into the ambulance. The police determined it was an accident. Poor visibility, icy conditions, no alcohol involved. I wasn't charged, but the legal system's absolution did nothing to ease the crushing weight of guilt that settled on my shoulders that night. "You stayed," she said, as if reading my thoughts. "The police told us you stayed until they released you. You didn't run." Her voice carried no accusation, just a quiet observation that somehow made everything worse. I would have preferred anger, screaming, demands for justice. This calm acknowledgement of my minimal decency felt like salt in a wound that had never properly healed. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands trembling as I put the car in park. 25 years of carrying this secret, and now here was David's grandmother, sitting in my passenger seat like some kind of divine appointment I couldn't escape. "Mrs. Chen," I began, but she held up a gentle hand to stop me. "I know what you're going to say," she said softly. "You're going to apologize. Tell me how sorry you are, how not a day goes by that you don't think about him. And I believe you, Michael. I can see it in your eyes. You've been carrying this burden all these years." She carefully tucked the photograph back into her purse, her movements deliberate and practiced, like she'd done this exact thing many times before. "I've been looking for you for 5 years, she continued, her voice steady despite the tears that continued to fall. "Not for revenge, not to cause you pain. I needed to see your face, to understand who you were, to know if you remembered my grandson as more than just a moment of tragedy." The revelation hit me like another collision, the realization that while I'd been trying to forget, she'd been actively searching. She explained how she'd started with the police report, how she'd hired a private investigator when the official channels led nowhere. My name had been redacted from the documents she could access, protected by privacy laws designed to shield me from exactly this kind of encounter, but she was persistent, driven by something deeper than curiosity or even grief. "After David died, our family fell apart," she said, staring out at the rain-streaked windshield. "His parents, my daughter and son-in-law, they divorced within 2 years, couldn't look at each other without seeing what they'd lost. My daughter moved across the country, remarried, had other children. She wanted to forget, to move on, but I couldn't. The private investigator had eventually tracked down witnesses, cross-referenced insurance records, and pieced together enough information to identify me. But by then, I'd moved 3 times, changed jobs twice, and essentially disappeared into the anonymity of a large city. It wasn't until I started driving for the rideshare app that I became findable again, my name and photo visible to anyone who knew how to look. "I've been taking rides with different drivers for months," she admitted, "hoping to randomly get matched with you. Tonight was the first time the app showed your car in my area." The dedication behind her search was both touching and terrifying. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was the culmination of years of patient determination, a grandmother's love, refusing to let her grandson's memory fade into bureaucratic obscurity. I turned off the engine, and we sat in the sudden quiet, broken only by the rhythm of rain against the roof. "Mrs. Chen," I finally managed, "I need you to know that not a single day has passed without me thinking about David. I see his face every time I close my eyes. I've donated to scholarship funds, volunteered at safe driving programs, tried to find ways to honor his memory, but nothing ever felt like enough. She listened without interruption as I told her about the therapy sessions, the support groups for people involved in fatal accidents, the way I'd structured my entire life around avoiding situations where I might hurt someone else. I'd never married, never had children, partly because I didn't trust myself to be responsible for other lives when I'd already proven capable of destroying one. I changed my whole existence because of that night, I continued. Moved away from everyone I knew, took jobs that kept me isolated, built walls around myself because I didn't deserve connection or happiness. When I started driving for the app, it was the first time in years I'd allowed myself to interact with people regularly. And even then, I told myself it was penance, serving others as a way to balance the scales. Mrs. Chen reached across the console and placed her weathered hand over mine. The gesture was so unexpected, so gentle, that it broke something inside me that had been holding firm for decades. "Michael," she said softly, "you've been punishing yourself for an accident." David wouldn't have wanted that. He was studying to be a social worker, you know. He believed in redemption, in second chances, in the power of people to heal and grow. Her touch was warm, maternal, and completely at odds with what I'd expected from this encounter. I'd imagined screaming, accusations, demands for justice that I couldn't provide. Instead, she was offering something I'd never thought possible. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding, recognition of the humanity in both our pain. "There's something else," she said, withdrawing her hand and reaching back into her purse. "Something the police report didn't include. Something I learned from the hospital records years later." She pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents and medical reports that looked official and serious. My stomach clenched as she opened the folder, revealing pages of medical terminology and test results that I couldn't immediately understand. "David had been drinking that night," she said quietly. Not heavily, but enough that his judgment was impaired. The hospital ran a blood test as part of the autopsy procedure. His blood alcohol level was 0.9, just over the legal limit. The words hit me like a physical blow, reshaping everything I thought I knew about that night. For 25 years, I'd carried the full weight of responsibility, believing that my speed and the icy conditions were the sole causes of the collision. The possibility that David might have been impaired, that his own judgment might have been compromised, had never occurred to me. "Why didn't the police tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She explained that the information wasn't relevant to their investigation since David was the victim, not the driver. The focus had been on my actions, my sobriety, my culpability. His blood alcohol level was noted in the medical examiner's report, but never became part of the official accident investigation. "I'm not telling you this to absolve you of responsibility," she said carefully. "David made a choice to drink and then ride his bicycle home. You made a choice to drive faster than conditions warranted. Both choices contributed to the tragedy. But for 25 years, you've been carrying guilt that belonged to both of you." The revelation was simultaneously liberating and devastating, forcing me to reconsider not just that night, but the entire trajectory of my life since. Mrs. Chen pulled out another photograph, this one showing a family gathering around a Christmas tree. David was there, maybe 17 in this picture, surrounded by parents, siblings, cousins, and grandparents. Everyone was smiling, caught in a moment of pure joy and connection. "This was our last Christmas together," she said, tracing David's face with her finger. She began telling me about who he really was, beyond the tragedy that had defined him in my memory. David had been the family comedian, always ready with a joke or silly impression that could lighten any mood. He'd volunteered at a local animal shelter, had a girlfriend he'd been planning to propose to after graduation, and dreamed of working with at-risk youth in urban communities. He wasn't perfect, she continued, showing me more photos. David at various ages, playing sports, graduating from high school, working at summer jobs. He struggled with anxiety, sometimes drank too much at parties, had a tendency to take risks that worried his parents. But he was kind, genuinely kind in a way that's rare in young people today. The David she described was three-dimensional, human, flawed. so different from the perfect victim I'd created in my mind. For decades, I'd idealized him, turned him into a saint whose death was purely my fault and my burden to bear. Learning about his struggles, his mistakes, his ordinary human failings, somehow made his death more tragic, but also more real. "I wanted you to know him as a person, not just as your victim," she said, carefully returning the photos to her purse. "And I wanted to understand you as a person too. The man who killed my grandson, but also the man who spent 25 years trying to make amends for a moment of imperfect judgment on a dangerous night. You weren't the only one whose life was destroyed that night," Mrs. Chen said, her voice taking on a harder edge. David's father started drinking heavily after the funeral, lost his job, then his marriage, then his relationship with his surviving children. He died of liver failure 8 years ago, essentially a delayed casualty of the same accident that took David. The ripple effects of that December night continued to spread outward, she explained, touching lives in ways I'd never imagined. David's younger sister developed severe anxiety and depression, requiring years of therapy and medication. His mother remarried, but struggled to bond with her stepchildren, always comparing them to the son she'd lost. The girlfriend he'd planned to propose to never married, convinced that true love was something that could be stolen in an instant. "And then there was me," she continued. "I became obsessed with keeping David's memory alive, with making sure he wasn't forgotten. I turned his childhood bedroom into a shrine, celebrated his birthday every year with a cake he'd never eat, bought Christmas presents for a grandson who'd never opened them. My husband begged me to get help, to move on, but I couldn't. I wouldn't." She described how her marriage had suffered under the weight of her grief, how her relationship with her surviving grandchildren had been strained by her inability to love them without constantly mourning the one she'd lost. Her husband had died 3 years earlier, and she'd realized at his funeral that she'd spent more time talking to David's photographs than she had to the man who'd shared her bed for 47 years. "That's when I decided I needed to find you," she said. "Not for closure, I hate that word, but for understanding. I needed to see if you were living your life, or if you were as trapped by that night as the rest of us." Her honesty was brutal and beautiful, laying bare the true cost of tragedy, not just the immediate loss, but the decades of collateral damage that followed. As we talked, the similarities between our post-accident lives became eerily apparent. While I'd isolated myself through guilt, she'd isolated herself through grief. I'd avoided deep relationships to protect others from my perceived toxicity. She'd avoided them to protect David's memory from being diluted by new love. We'd both become prisoners of December 15th, 1998, living in a suspended animation that honored neither David's memory nor our own need for healing. "I used to drive by the intersection," she admitted. "Every year on the anniversary, I'd stand there and try to feel close to him. I'd bring flowers, say prayers, sometimes just scream at the empty street. It became a ritual, but not a healthy one. It was like picking at a wound to keep it from healing. I confessed that I'd done the same thing, driving past the site whenever I felt like I was getting too comfortable, too happy, too forgetful of the weight I was supposed to carry. We'd probably been there on the same days, two broken people orbiting the same point of devastation without ever knowing the other was there. The rain had stopped while we talked, and the city lights were beginning to reflect off the wet streets, creating patterns of light and shadow that seemed to shift with our conversation. "We've been living parallel lives," she observed. "Both of us stuck in the same moment, neither of us really living." She told me about the support groups she'd tried, the grief counselors who'd attempted to help her process David's death in healthier ways, but she'd resisted their efforts, afraid that healing meant forgetting, that moving forward meant leaving David behind. It was only recently, after her husband's death, that she'd begun to understand the difference between honoring memory and being enslaved by it. "The address I gave you," she said quietly. "It's not where I live, it's where David is buried." The revelation sent another shock through me. The realization that this entire journey had been leading to a confrontation not just with her, but with his physical resting place. I'd never visited his grave, never even known where he was buried. She explained that she'd planned this carefully. The ride to the cemetery was meant to be a pilgrimage of sorts, a chance for both of us to face the reality of his death together. "I thought maybe if we went there together, if we both acknowledged what we'd lost, and what we'd done to ourselves since, maybe we could figure out how to move forward. The GPS indicated we were still 10 minutes away from our destination, but I found myself driving more slowly, reluctant to reach the end point of this unexpected journey. The cemetery visit felt both necessary and terrifying, a confrontation with physical evidence of the life I'd ended and the guilt I'd carried. "You don't have to come to the grave with me," she said, seeming to sense my apprehension. "You can drop me off and leave. I'll call another ride home." But I wanted to give you the option, the chance to finally meet David properly, to say whatever you've been carrying all these years. The offer was generous and terrifying in equal measure. For 25 years, I'd avoided any concrete reminder of David's existence beyond my own memories of that night. I'd never Googled his name, never looked up his obituary, never tried to learn anything about the life I'd ended. Facing his grave would make everything real in a way I wasn't sure I could handle. The Riverside Memorial Cemetery appeared ahead of us, its iron gate standing open despite the late hour. The grounds were well maintained, with winding paths illuminated by soft lighting that created a peaceful, almost ethereal atmosphere. I pulled through the entrance and followed Mrs. Chen's directions toward the newer section where David was buried. "He's in Section C near the oak tree," she said, pointing toward a cluster of headstones about 50 yards from where I parked. "Plot 247. I chose it because he always loved trees. Used to climb them as a boy, despite his mother's protests." These small details about David's personality continued to humanize him, making him more real and somehow more lost. I turned off the engine and we sat in silence for several minutes, both of us staring toward the area where David rested. The weight of the moment pressed down on us, 25 years of separate grief and guilt converging at this single point. "I come here every Sunday," she said softly. "Have for years. I bring fresh flowers, tell him about family news, sometimes just sit and remember." She opened her car door, then paused. "Michael, I need you to know something before we do this." "I didn't bring you here to torture you or to force some kind of dramatic confrontation. I brought you here because I think we both need to stop living in that December night and start living in the present. But that can't happen until we face what actually happened." The cemetery was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the rustle of wind through the trees. A few other visitors were scattered throughout the grounds, some placing flowers, others simply standing in contemplation. Death was a constant here, but so was the evidence of love that persisted beyond loss. Fresh flowers, carefully tended graves, the ongoing rituals of remembrance that spoke to connections that transcended physical existence. David's headstone was simple but elegant, black granite with his name, dates, and a brief inscription, "Beloved son and grandson, whose kindness touched everyone he met." Below that was an engraved image of a tree, its branches reaching upward in a design that suggested growth and aspiration rather than endings. Mrs. Chen knelt beside the grave and began her weekly ritual, removing the previous week's flowers, cleaning the headstone with a small cloth she'd brought, arranging fresh daisies in the built-in vase. Her movements were practiced, reverent, the actions of someone who'd performed this ceremony hundreds of times. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "Grandma brought someone to meet you today." I stood awkwardly behind her, unsure of the protocol for meeting someone you'd killed. What do you say to a grave? How do you apologize to bones and memories? The inadequacy of language felt overwhelming. 25 years of imagined conversations reduced to stammering silence in the face of carved stone and buried reality. "David," I finally managed, my voice cracking on his name. "I'm Michael. I'm the one who—" "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." The words felt pathetic, insufficient, but they were all I had. "Mrs. Chen looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but also with something that looked like approval, as if my simple acknowledgement was exactly what she'd hoped for. She patted the ground beside her, inviting me to kneel next to David's grave. The grass was soft and slightly damp from the earlier rain, and being at ground level made the headstone seem larger, more imposing. "Tell him about yourself," she suggested gently. "He would have wanted to know who you were, not just what happened between you." So I talked to David. I told him about my life before that December night, my job at the factory, my relationship with Sarah, my plans to propose that spring. I described the man I'd been. Flawed, sometimes careless, but fundamentally good-hearted and optimistic about the future. It felt important that he know I hadn't been a monster, just a young man making a tragic mistake. I told him about the life I'd lived since, the isolation, the guilt, the way I'd tried to honor his memory through service and sacrifice. I described my years of driving, the thousands of people I'd safely transported, the way I'd made his death mean something by dedicating myself to protecting others. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was purpose. Mrs. Chen listened to my one-sided conversation with David, occasionally adding details about his life that connected to mine. When I mentioned loving animals, she told me about his volunteer work at the shelter. When I talked about my fear of commitment, she shared how David had been planning to propose to his girlfriend, how he'd saved money for months to buy her a ring. "He would have forgiven you," she said suddenly, interrupting my rambling confession. "That's the kind of person he was. He got into fights with bullies who picked on smaller kids. He brought home stray cats despite being allergic. He believed people deserved second chances, even when they'd made terrible mistakes." The certainty in her voice was both comforting and devastating. To know that David would have offered forgiveness made my 25 years of self-punishment seem both unnecessary and somehow disrespectful to his memory. If he would have wanted me to heal and move forward, then my insistence on carrying guilt was actually contrary to his values and wishes. "But here's what I've learned about forgiveness," Mrs. Chen continued, settling more comfortably beside the grave. "It's not something that happens once, dramatically like in the movies. It's a choice you make over and over again, sometimes multiple times in a single day. And it's not really about the person who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of anger and pain." She told me about her journey toward forgiveness, how it had taken years of therapy and spiritual counseling to even understand what it meant. "I used to think forgiving you would mean David's death didn't matter, that I was betraying his memory by letting go of my anger. But I realized that holding on to hatred was actually dishonoring him, because he never would have wanted his death to poison so many lives. The process hadn't been linear or simple. She'd forgiven me and then taken it back countless times, cycling between compassion and rage depending on her mood, the anniversary dates, the random triggers that brought her grief rushing back. "Some days I still hate you," she admitted with startling honesty. "Some days I imagine confronting you with anger and accusations, but most days now I just feel sad for all of us." Her honesty was liberating. The idea that forgiveness could be imperfect, inconsistent, and ongoing made it seem more achievable than the absolute absolution I'd thought I needed. "I've been waiting for you to forgive me," I told her, "but I think I've been waiting for the wrong thing. I need to learn to forgive myself." She nodded, understanding immediately what I meant. "That's the hardest part," she said. "Forgiving yourself for being human, for making a mistake that had consequences you never intended. David's death was a tragedy, but your refusal to live afterward doesn't honor his memory. It just creates more tragedy." If this story is resonating with you, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps these important stories reach others who might need to hear them. Mrs. Chen reached into her purse one more time and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age and worn from handling. "David wrote this the week before he died," she said, handing it to me. "It was in his backpack when it happened. The police gave it to us with his other belongings. I think you should read it." The envelope was addressed to future me in David's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter he'd written to himself, apparently as part of some college assignment or personal reflection exercise. My hands shook as I unfolded the pages, aware that I was about to read the private thoughts of the young man whose life I'd ended. "Dear future David," the letter began. "I'm writing this during finals week of my senior year, and I'm thinking about who I want to become. I know I'm not perfect. I drink too much sometimes, I take stupid risks. I don't always think before I act, but I want to be better. I want to help people, to make a difference in the world, to be someone my family can be proud of." The letter continued for several pages, outlining David's hopes, fears, and aspirations. He wrote about his struggles with anxiety, his tendency toward impulsiveness, his desire to work with troubled youth, because he understood what it felt like to make mistakes and need second chances. He acknowledged his flaws with remarkable self-awareness for someone so young. I hope by the time I read this again, I'll have learned to forgive myself for not being perfect, the letter concluded.
I hope I'll have learned that making mistakes doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you human. And I hope I'll remember to extend that same forgiveness to others, because everyone deserves the chance to grow and change and become better than their worst moments. Reading David's words about forgiveness and second chances while sitting beside his grave was almost unbearably poignant. Here was a young man who understood, even at 19, truths about human nature and redemption that I'd spent 25 years struggling to accept. His wisdom seemed to reach across the divide between life and death, offering guidance I desperately needed. He wrote that just days before the accident, Mrs. Chen said softly. When I first read it right after the funeral, it made me angry. I thought, how dare he talk about forgiveness when he won't get the chance to grow up, to become the man he wanted to be. But over the years, I've come to see it differently. She explained how the letter had become a source of comfort and guidance for her, a reminder of David's essential character and values. When she struggled with anger or bitterness, she would reread his words about extending forgiveness to others, about recognizing that everyone deserves the chance to become better than their worst moments. I think he would want me to give you this letter, she said, not because it absolves you of responsibility, but because it shows you who he really was. Someone who understood that life is complicated, that good people sometimes do terrible things, and that healing requires forgiveness of ourselves and others. The letter felt heavy in my hands, weighted with significance beyond its few pages. It was like receiving a message from David himself, a communication across the years that spoke directly to the guilt and self-hatred I'd been carrying. His words about not being defined by our worst moments seemed written specifically for me, though he died before we ever met. There's something else I need to tell you, Mrs. Chen said, her voice taking on a different quality, more determined, more forward-looking. Finding you wasn't just about the past, it was about the future. I have a proposition for you, something I think David would approve of. She explained that she'd been working for the past 2 years to establish a foundation in David's memory, focused on traffic safety education and support for families affected by vehicle accidents. The foundation was nearly ready to launch, but she needed someone to help run it, someone who understood both sides of these tragedies, who could speak to drivers about the real consequences of careless decisions. I want you to work with me, she said simply. I want us to turn this tragedy into something meaningful, something that might prevent other families from going through what we've experienced. You have a story to tell, Michael, and people need to hear it. The proposal was stunning in its audacity and generosity. After 25 years of isolation and self-punishment, she was offering me not just forgiveness but partnership, a chance to transform my guilt into action. The foundation would provide defensive driving courses, support groups for accident survivors and families of victims, and advocacy for safer road conditions. I can't do this alone, she continued. I understand the victim's side, but I need someone who understands the driver's experience, the guilt and trauma that follows these accidents. Together, we could create something powerful, something that honors David's memory while helping others heal. The offer represented everything I'd been searching for without knowing it, a way to channel my remorse into meaningful action, to transform the worst moment of my life into a source of prevention and healing for others. It was redemption not through forgetting the past, but by using it to create a better future. I stared at David's headstone, trying to process Mrs. Chen's incredible offer. Working with her would mean facing my past daily, reliving the accident and its aftermath in service of preventing similar tragedies. It would be the opposite of the isolation I'd chosen, a public acknowledgement of my role in David's death, but also a commitment to ensuring his death had meaning beyond the grief it caused. I don't know if I'm strong enough, I admitted. For 25 years, I've barely been able to function with this guilt. How can I stand in front of people and talk about what happened? How can I represent David's memory when I'm the one who ended his life? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering my fears. Because,
she finally said. "You're the next morning brought Detective Morrison to my doorstep, her badge gleaming in the early sunlight. She looked tired, like she'd been working through the night, and her questions came rapid fire. Mr. Chen, we need to talk about your passenger from 2 nights ago, the woman who got out at Riverside Park." I invited her in, my hands shaking slightly as I poured coffee. The weight of what I knew pressed down on me like a physical force. "I told you everything I could remember," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. The detective's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "We found something," she said, pulling out her phone. The screen showed a grainy security camera image from a building near the park. In it, a figure could be seen walking away from what looked like my car, but the timestamp was wrong. It showed 11:47 p.m., not the 10:30 I remembered. My heart stopped. Either my memory was failing me or something else was happening here. The detective watched my reaction carefully, her pen poised over her notepad. "Does this time frame match what you remember, Mr. Chen?" The discrepancy gnawed at me. Had I lost track of time during that strange conversation? Had Margaret somehow altered my perception of when things happened? I thought about her calm demeanor, her knowing smile, the way she seemed to anticipate my questions before I asked them. Something wasn't adding up, and the detective's presence confirmed my growing suspicions that this case was far more complex than a simple missing person report. Detective Morrison spread several photographs across my kitchen table, each one showing different angles of the park from that night. Security cameras from nearby businesses had captured fragments of movement, shadows that could have been anyone. But one image made my blood run cold. It showed my car, clearly visible under a streetlight, but there were 2 figures getting out, not one. 2 distinct silhouettes, one taller than the other, both moving toward the park entrance. I stared at the photo, my mind racing to reconcile this with my memories. "I only had one passenger," I insisted, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. The detective leaned forward, her expression a mixture of concern and professional skepticism. She'd seen this before, witnesses whose memories didn't match the evidence. Memory can be unreliable, especially during stressful situations, she said gently. "Is it possible someone else was in your car? Maybe someone who got in earlier, before you picked up Margaret?" But I kept meticulous records, checked my back seat after every ride. The idea of missing a passenger seemed impossible. The detective's radio crackled and she stepped away to take the call. I could hear fragments of conversation, words like forensics and blood trace that made my stomach churn. When she returned, her expression had changed completely. The case had just taken another turn, and I could see in her eyes that whatever they'd found at the park was going to change everything I thought I knew about that night. "We found Margaret Williams," Detective Morrison said, her voice heavy with implications I didn't want to understand. "She's been dead for 3 days. Her body was discovered this morning in her apartment downtown, apparent suicide. Time of death puts it at roughly 48 hours before you claim to have picked her up." The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table, fighting waves of nausea and confusion. "That's impossible. She was in my car. We talked for 20 minutes. She paid me through the app. But even as I protested, I was pulling out my phone, checking my ride history with trembling fingers. There was no record of the ride. No payment, no pickup request, no trace in the system that Margaret Williams had ever been my passenger. The app showed a gap in my driving history during exactly the time I remembered picking her up. It was as if those 20 minutes had been erased from digital existence. Detective Morrison watched me process this information, her expression a mixture of professional concern and human sympathy. "Mr. Chen, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Have you been under any unusual stress lately? Taking any new medications? Experiencing any health issues we should know about?" I wanted to argue, to insist on the reality of my experience, but the evidence was overwhelming. Either I was losing my mind, or something far stranger than a simple missing person case was unfolding. The detective's next words confirmed my worst fears. "We're going to need you to come down to the station. There are some things about Margaret Williams' death that don't add up, and right now you're the only connection we have to her final hours." At the police station, they showed me Margaret's photograph from her driver's license. It was definitely her, the same face that had stared back at me from my rearview mirror 2 nights ago. But according to the coroner's report, she'd been dead since Monday evening, found in her locked apartment with no signs of forced entry. The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing hour. Detective Morrison and her partner took turns asking questions, probing for inconsistencies in my story. They were professional but persistent, trying to understand how I could have such detailed memories of a conversation with a dead woman. "Tell us about the park again," Detective Morrison said for the fourth time. "What exactly did she say when you dropped her off?" I repeated Margaret's words about finding peace, about her brother, about the choices that had led her there. Each detail felt real, carved into my memory with perfect clarity, but the evidence painted a different picture. Margaret Williams had no brother. She'd been estranged from her family for years, living alone in a studio apartment filled with empty bottles and unpaid bills. The woman I remembered, composed and reflective, seemed to be someone else entirely. The breakthrough came when they showed me security footage from Margaret's apartment building. The timestamp showed her entering alone on Monday evening, but there was something else. In the grainy black and white video, I caught a glimpse of someone who looked remarkably like me walking past the building's entrance, just hours before her estimated time of death. The implications hit me like a physical blow, and I realized this nightmare was just beginning. Dr. Sarah Kim, the neurologist they brought in to evaluate me, had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She explained that severe stress and sleep deprivation could create vivid false memories, experiences that felt completely real, but never actually happened. "The mind is remarkably creative when it's trying to process trauma," she said. The trauma, it turned out, was my own. 3 months of medical records told a story I'd been refusing to acknowledge. Early-stage dementia, episodes of confusion, moments where I'd lost track of time and place. The symptoms I'd been attributing to exhaustion were something far more serious. Margaret Williams had been my neighbor, living in the apartment building where I'd moved after selling my house to pay for medical bills. We'd spoken occasionally in the hallway, brief conversations about weather and local news. In my deteriorating mind, these fragments had been woven into an elaborate false memory, a final ride that never happened. The security footage showing someone who looked like me wasn't evidence of a crime, but of my own confused wandering. I'd been found by building security that Monday night, disoriented and asking for directions home. They'd called my emergency contact, my daughter Sarah, who'd been trying to convince me to stop driving for months. Detective Morrison closed her notebook with a gentle snap. "Mr. Chen, there's no crime here, just a tragedy. Margaret Williams took her own life, and your mind created a story to help you process encountering death so close to home. It's more common than you might think." The investigation was over, but my real journey was just beginning. 6 months later, I sit in my daughter's living room watching my granddaughter play with blocks on the carpet. The Uber app is deleted from my phone, my driving days behind me. The diagnosis was difficult to accept, but it brought a strange kind of peace, an explanation for the confusion that had been building for months. I still think about Margaret Williams sometimes, the real woman who died alone in that apartment. The investigation revealed she'd been struggling with depression and addiction, isolated from family and friends. In my mind, I'd given her a final conversation, a moment of connection before her death. Perhaps that was my subconscious trying to offer her what she'd needed most. Dr. Kim says the false memories might continue, that my brain will keep trying to fill gaps with stories that feel true. But I'm learning to question my perceptions, to rely on the people who love me, to help distinguish reality from the elaborate fictions my mind creates. My daughter Sarah has been patient, helping me navigate this new reality where my most vivid experiences might be nothing more than neural misfiring. She's arranged for care, for activities that keep me engaged, for a life that has meaning even as my memories become unreliable. 10 years of driving strangers through the night taught me that everyone has a story. Everyone carries secrets and sorrows they rarely share. Now I understand that sometimes our minds create the conversations we need to have, the connections we're desperate to make. If you've made it this far in my story, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and share your own experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful journeys happen not on the road, but in the landscapes of memory and imagination. Margaret Williams never got her final ride, but in my heart, she found her peace.